Institutions lied to them. Corporations downsized them. The economy blindsided them, more than once. But the coffee brand never changed the formula. The running shoes still fit the same way they did in 1994. Most people assume that's nostalgia. Simpler times. Growing up before everything became disposable. That's the wrong explanation. The real one is darker, more specific, and once you hear it, you won't be able to unsee it. There's a generation walking around right now with almost zero loyalty to the companies they work for. They'll leave via email. They'll walk away from a 15-year career without drama, without guilt, without looking back. And yet, they've been buying the same brand of coffee since their 20s, the same running shoes, the same notebook. And if any of those brands disappeared tomorrow, they'd feel something that's hard to name but impossible to miss. That's not habit. That's not sentimentality. That's a very specific kind of trust, one that didn't form through marketing or convenience. It formed through elimination, through watching everything else prove itself untrustworthy, one broken promise at a time. And to understand why Gen X trusts products more than institutions, you have to go back to the moment the first promise broke. Picture this. It's 1985. You're 12 years old. Your dad comes home from work, same time he always does, same company he's worked at for 14 years. Dinner's on the table. The mortgage is being paid down on schedule. There's a pension waiting at the end of the road. The formula is simple. Show up, stay loyal, get taken care of. You watch it work. You believe it. That belief wasn't naive. It was evidence-based. The people around them had followed the formula and it had delivered. So Gen X absorbed it early, this idea that institutions, if you gave them enough of yourself, would give something back. Then the 90s arrived, then the dot-com collapse, then 9/11, then 2008. Each shock landing at a different life stage, first job, first mortgage, young kids, mid-career. Over and over, just as something felt stable, the ground shifted. And here's what that does to a person over time. When instability isn't a one-time event, but a repeating pattern, your brain stops filing it as bad luck. It starts filing it as the default. Security stops feeling real. Loyalty to institutions starts feeling less like virtue and more like exposure. The formula didn't just fail. It revealed itself as something that was never really a formula at all. So what do you do with trust after that? You don't abandon it completely. You restructure it. You get very quiet, very selective about where it goes, and you start paying attention, maybe for the first time, to the things that didn't change. The things that showed up the same way, every time, without announcement, without drama. The coffee that tasted exactly like it did the first time you bought it. The shoes that fit the same way they always had. Small things, unremarkable things. Things that never called a meeting to announce a restructuring. And slowly, without anyone deciding it consciously, those things ended up on a very short list. That list is what most people misread as nostalgia. But nostalgia is about the past. This is about the present. It's not that Gen X wants to go back to 1994. It's that in 1994, a specific brand proved itself. And in the decades since, nothing has given them a reason to revise that verdict. That's not sentiment. That's a track record. Research backs this up in ways that are almost uncomfortable to look at directly. Gen Xers are significantly more likely than millennials to stick with the same brands they used in their youth, even when objectively cheaper or better alternatives exist. Not because they haven't noticed the alternatives, because the calculus is different. Switching means extending trust to something unproven. And extending trust to something unproven is a cost Gen X feels in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been burned the same number of times. The brand didn't earn loyalty through a rewards program. It earned it by simply not becoming another thing on the list of things that let them down. There's another layer here that's easy to miss. With an employer, you are chosen and unchosen. The decision is never fully yours. You can perform perfectly and still get walked out with a cardboard box because someone 3 levels above you decided the numbers needed to look different this quarter. You are, at some fundamental level, a variable. With a brand, you choose, every single time. You walk past the cheaper option on the shelf and you pick the one you trust. That act, small, quiet, repeated, is one of the few places in an economic life full of uncertainty where Gen X gets to be the one holding the power. Where loyalty is something they extend, not something they're expected to perform on demand. That asymmetry matters more than it looks. It's not about the product. It's about agency. And for a generation that spent decades watching agency get stripped away by forces they couldn't control, having it, even in something as small as which coffee you buy, is not nothing. Watch what happens when a brand crosses to the wrong side of that list. Formula change, acquisition, sudden quality drop. The reaction from a loyal Gen X customer tends to be disproportionate, and that disproportionality is the tell. Because it was never really about the product. It was about one more reliable thing becoming unreliable. One more item getting crossed off a list that was already short. It looks like overreaction. It isn't. It's the accumulated weight of every other thing that changed without warning, landing on this one moment. The brand didn't just change its recipe. It joined the long list of things that couldn't be counted on. And that list, for Gen X, has been getting longer their entire adult lives. So here's what this actually reveals. Not just about Gen X, but about how trust works once it's been genuinely restructured by experience. You don't stop trusting. You narrow. You become precise. The circle gets smaller, but what's inside it gets held with a grip that looks irrational to anyone who hasn't earned their skepticism the same way. The brands that made it onto that list didn't get there through clever marketing. They got there by doing something that turned out to be extraordinarily rare. They just didn't disappoint. They didn't change the terms. They didn't send a form letter. They showed up the same way, every time, for years. And in a life shaped by things that changed without warning, that kind of consistency stopped being ordinary. It became something closer to proof. Proof that not everything breaks. Proof that some things can be counted on. Proof that the list, however short, is real. The brands Gen X carries aren't really about the products. They never were. They're about what those products represent. A short, quiet list of things that stayed the same when everything else didn't. In a life shaped by institutions that changed the terms, employers that handed out cardboard boxes, and an economy that moved the goalposts more than once, consistency stopped being ordinary. It became rare enough to mean something. So the next time you see a Gen Xer defend a brand with a calm certainty that seems out of proportion, understand what you're actually looking at. You're not looking at stubbornness. You're not looking at nostalgia. You're looking at someone who learned, the hard way, exactly how short the list of reliable things really is, and who decided, a long time ago, to hold on to what made it.